So welcome everyone, and my name is Stan Chu-Ilo. I'm a Catholic priest, and I'm a research professor at the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul. And we thank you for being part of this roundtable. And the general theme of this World Catholicism Week is the Church of Now, Young People and Global Catholicism Today. And for our roundtable, we have assembled three very distinguished speakers who have made significant contribution in this field in the area of trauma, violence, and moral courage. And I will introduce them briefly, and then they will speak in the order that we have on the program. So first is Chiaretto Yan, who is a visiting professor at National Catholic Seminary in Beijing and visiting professor at University of St. Joseph, Macau. And Chiaretto is a pianist, so I don't know if you're going to play some songs for us, Chiaretto.
No, I'm not. I'm panelist, not a pianist.
I see. Sorry. That's what I see in my text. So Chiaretto lives in Shanghai and serves as a research fellow as well as Sofia University Institute in Italy. He holds a doctorate from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome and an MA in Oriental Religions and Cultures from the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. He is the author of Evangelization in China, Challenges and Prospects, among many other titles. So the second speaker today is Jodi Mikalachki, an associate professor of English at the University of Burundi's Institute of Applied Pedagogy in Bujumbura. A Canadian by birth and upbringing, she did her initial degrees at the University of Toronto in modern languages and English literature, followed by an interdisciplinary doctorate at Yale University. She taught at the Faculty of Wellesley College in Massachusetts for 15 years before moving to Burundi in 2008, where she served as a rural teacher, a teacher trainer before joining the University of Burundi in Bujumbura. She has lectured in Africa, Europe, and the United States on Burundian responses to genocide and civil war, and uses nonviolent strategies for narrating conflict in contemporary Burundian literature to the historical witness and legacy of the Martyrs of Fraternity of Buta. So she's done a lot of translation of books by Burundian authors, one of which is Zachary Bukuru's We Are All Children of God, the story of the 40 young martyrs of Buta, Burundi, published by Paulines in 2015, and Antoine Kaburahe's Hutsi, In the Name of God, Us All. And her current research will form part of the presentation that she will make at this roundtable. Then our final speaker is Flora Samba Pasquereau, who is a clinical psychologist for victims of violent conflict, working with the United Nations Special Criminal Court in Bangui, Central African Republic. Flora is a mother of three and a woman who identifies with three continents: Europe, Africa, and North America, particularly Canada, and also speaks many languages. A clinical psychologist and a psychopathologist who completed her studies in France. She's also a registered teacher, a registered psychotherapist, and family mediator. Born and raised in Central African Republic, She has resided in Canada since 2006, but travels home often to work as a clinical psychologist for the United Nations Development Program and the Special Criminal Court. She also has championed women empowerment through microfinance projects like the Espérance et Solidarité pour la Centrafrique, Hope and Solidarity for Women of Central African Republic. So we have a very formidable team, and I will now invite our first speaker, Chiaretto Jan, to please speak to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm the first panelist. I'm going to speak about how young Catholics live their faith and navigate changes in China. My talk will be divided in 3 parts. As you all know that after the reform period, China has undergone tremendous changes in the last 40 years. So the first part, I will speak on the background and the context of Catholics in China. Second, how they navigate changes in this last 40 years of social and mobility changes. And then the last part, I will narrate experiences of how they face severe challenges, especially in the last 2 years, with moral courage. So let's go to another slide, slide 2. The context. The Vatican II shifted the attention of the church from the church itself to the interlocutor whom mission aims at. Therefore, let's take a look at the context of China, characterized by huge social mobility and urban-rural dichotomy in the last few decades. China has experienced the biggest human migration and urbanization in human history. 50% of its population moved from the poor rural area to cities in the last 40 years. Social changes have been enormous, therefore also challenges. Although Catholics comprise only less than 1% of the Chinese population, historically Catholics communities are mostly concentrated in some rural area. The church in China has to cope with these changes. In the present social context, we look into the mission of the church. I'll speak about the importance of the formation of the laity and the youth. I concentrate on 3 groups. First, students and the youth. Second, migrant families. And third, professionals and what we call entrepreneurial Christians. So let's go into this, how Catholics live their faith in the last 2 decades of social mobility. Accompaniment is important according to different life stages and age groups. The laity and the youth have played an important role, very active role in evangelization and in this urban and rural mobility. Many teens and youth in the rural area have gone through the experience of the so-called left behind children, because one decade ago, few decades ago, there was this one-child policy, but now is more or less abolished. So they have these left behind children in the countryside have faced similar problems of lack of communication with parents. Several dioceses in the northern province of Hebei, where 1/5 of the Catholic population is concentrated, have started an initiative called the 100-day formation program for the youth, boys and girls separately. The program concentrates on human promotion, values, communication skill, and is offered to youth who are free from commitment of work and studies for a while. It is a good opportunity to take a break from the usual highly competitive environment and discern the direction of life. At that time, some schools for children of migrant workers are also set up in the big cities where these migrant workers moved to. As for students, university, next slide, or college is a time for academic pursuits. At the same time, independent thinking and seeking a meaning for life are important. The youth go to cities for their studies. In some provinces where traditional Catholics are concentrated, such as Hebei province, Sichuan province, Shanxi, during holidays in their hometown, they go back to their hometown and they have church activities like group sharing and exchanges. The need of getting together during the school year when they go back to the big city where they attend college grow. This need. They met at Sunday Mass at the whole city where they study. Little by little, faith, and they call it faith and friendship groups, were spontaneously born on their own initiatives. And then they were helped also by their some clergy of the diocese of their origin, or by the parish priests dedicated to youth ministry at the host city, at the host parish. There is also another group, next slide, called YCS, Young Catholic Students, that care and pay particular attention to the needs of high school students. According to its guiding principle, the youth should animate the youth themselves. Although they have priests as spiritual directors, in the light of the gospel, the teenagers are accompanying one another in the process of see, judge, act, revealed of life, and benefit from this group experience. As they grow spiritually and in age, some feel the call to dedicate themselves to help the younger ones. Therefore, senior high school students will help junior student groups, and some will remain to animate the high school student even after entering college. The annual nationwide, what we call Gaokao, college entrance exam in China, in the rigid education system of China, is very important for the students. This Gaokao. It's an important event in life. The students are under tremendous pressure. They form this initiative. A college student of the group will be assigned, paired with a high school student taking this exam, pray for him, and this really offer great moral support one for the other. Now, let's go talk about migrant families. Next slide. Migrant families and professionals. As for adults, there are formation centers in many dioceses. Formation programs and activities are regularly held for specific groups such as pastoral workers, married couples, or professionals such as teachers. Programs help them witness the gospel in their respective field and environment. And for migrants to the cities, Bishop Jin Luxian in his Chinese New Year 2011 pastoral letter praised the experience of the faithful coming from Wenzhou province, residing in this big city of Shanghai. They are fervent Catholics active in Shanghai, even though they came from the countryside from Wenzhou. Shanghai Diocese assigned a priest as their spiritual director. Jin encouraged parishes dedicate pastoral care aimed at those coming from countryside and other provinces. He said, let them experience that the church is really a family and we are brothers and sisters. Some bigger dioceses from like Xianxian, Handan, Wenzhou also sent pastors to visit their faithful in these host cities during the year. So still another group I would like to talk about is what we call entrepreneur Christians. Move on. The professionals, please click the slide. The professionals and well-educated faithful are helpful in communicating with the government and society at large. Still take some couple more. Some ladies form regular Bible study groups. Still others are business people who try to offer Christian testimony in the business environment. There is an enterprise at Ningjing, Hebei, that employs several thousand workers. And entrepreneur Christian, as Mr. Geng, you see on the photo, is a self-made man with the whole family are fervent Catholics, instills Christian spirit in the corporate culture of and management. The employees are well treated with paid holidays. They can join wholesome activities organized by the company, working in a family atmosphere and feeling happy. As a consequence, some are attracted to the Christian faith. When I visited there, Mr. Geng shared with me this experience. He said, workers take shift, Christians are free to attend Sunday Mass. At some point, we decided to let everybody free from work on Sunday in front of workers. He was telling me this, in front of workers present, he asked everybody, did our production go down when we give more holidays to the workers? They all exclaimed loudly, no. They were all united, no, in this spirit. Now I go to the third part of my presentation. I will narrate some concrete experiences of how young Catholics navigate changes and especially face severe challenges, especially in the last couple of years, with moral courage. In China, there is a new religious policy, recently implemented under the supervision of the central government, while general guidelines are implemented locally. According to the government, this is so in view of severe factors to avoid religious extremism on the one hand and to guarantee social stability on the other. Moreover, it does not want religions, because of their international affiliation, to be a pretext for foreign intervention, covert or overt. All religions are therefore conditioned by prevailing political climate. This is more evident for Catholicism because of the distinction between the so-called official, patriotic, and underground unofficial church, which make it difficult for the church to play a prophetic role in society as it should. This poses a major challenge. How can the Catholic Church play a more active role in society? Regarding the theme of today, I'll narrate here some concrete experiences of how Catholics in China respond to these challenges at times of traumas, especially in two areas, namely these new religious policies with restrictions, and secondly, the COVID pandemic situation. Next. So some positive aspects I've mentioned earlier is in the last decades, these youth groups were formed when they go to the host cities, and this social this city countryside exchange, social changes, and mobility present challenges, particularly to the youth, but also created opportunities for them. A positive aspect of the urban-rural mobility is the exchange and reconciliation brought about in Catholic communities, especially among young Catholics who are not burdened by the baggage of divisions of the past. I mean, between the official church or underground church. The youth will go to the church that is nearest or most convenient to them. Groups of, at the same time, also group of laity spontaneously sprung up in local church in search of modern day available spirituality, ecclesial communities with mature experience and spirituality can contribute in collaboration with local clergies in accompanying the youth. Next. I'll talk about the challenge of living with and gaining space under these new religious regulations and restrictions. There are 5 religions officially recognized by the Chinese government: Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, and also Catholicism and Protestants are considered as 2 religions because they arrived in China historically in different times with different terminologies. Despite this official recognition, all religions are obliged to observe government regulations. Some new regulations that have a significant impact are prohibition of the use of internet for religious propagation and limit of religious education for minors. This has been implemented recently. Bishop Sheung from Yang Xiaoting from Shanxi Diocese once shared with me on how he spoke out in an official meeting with the religious authority about minor seminaries being the cradle of priestly vocation still in China. So much is at stake for the future as a fruit of this his outspoken, also friendly dialogue in a certain sense. There is now an exception, to the restriction. There are minor seminaries in 3 dioceses in China, including the one of Bishop Sheung, still running. Genuine priestly vocation is nurtured and fostered in a caring Christian environment, first of all in family or parishes, or also in the seminary. Although the trend is, as a common practice in developed countries, government welfare program covers free education for primary and secondary schools. So little by little, the minor seminaries are dying down. And another aspect is during the pandemic, since the beginning of the outbreak of COVID, it has been touching to see testimonies of how some Catholic nuns volunteer to offer their mobile clinic as ambulance for emergency service. The bishop from Chiaretto said some clergy and Catholic faithful offer their service in their districts to the nearby as volunteers alongside people without distinction of faith or belief. And even this crisis of COVID could be a period of good harvest, according to Father Rand from Shanxi province. Consider the pandemic a blessing in disguise. He said, for a few months, children didn't have a school and have to stay home in the villages, in the countryside. He said, I built some facilities for them to play, and sometimes I had a chance to give them catechetical lessons, even to these non-Catholic children. Outdoor activities like camping for children and teens were organized, for example, by the Flora community in Shanghai for children and teens. They visited wetlands to see birds and appreciate nature. The context is good to speak to them about ecology. Francis of Assisi or Pope Francis encyclical Laudato Si. At some points, they also initiated Zoom. I mean, before this new religious regulations implemented, they initiated these Zoom prayer meetings at bedtime with parents, together with children, prayer group meetings, which has been very fruitful. Another point would be the power of prayer and Eucharistic adoration and reflection. Even for adults, these are occasions for reflections. Spend time during the pandemic, spend time with the family and with nature. Some priests and sisters also promote adoration of the Blessed Sacrament in their dioceses. It helped turn the tide of overemphasis on worldly pursuits and activism without being always in a hurry, and they can find inner peace. Another challenge is the internet use for religious services online. Since March 1st this year, since 2 months ago, the new measures for the administration of internet religious information services forbids and limits online activities has taken effect. Online religious activities are disrupted and WeChat public accounts blocked. In the past, even though in the past these measures somehow existed, but it was not strictly implemented. But now they became very strict, and people have to continue to adapt to changes. However, during the lockdown period, starting in the spring of 2020, when Pope Francis Mass celebrated in the Vatican in Santa Marta, has reached also China as well. Thanks to the various WeChat platforms, Chinese Catholics were able to follow the live stream of with Chinese translations. Some apps were provided with Chinese translations. Even though now it is very much restricted, however, there's still an exception. An app platform called Catholic Assistant, developed by a group of young volunteers, exceptionally has been able to continue to operate in providing live transmission of the Holy Father from Rome. It is supported by the bishop, by the Beijing diocese, with consent granted by religious authority, foot of this moral courage of this group of young volunteers. Therefore, I just narrated some, even though in front of all these challenges, still the young people, some bishops were able to face these challenges with moral courage. And as a concluding remark, I'm also a professor at Catholic University of Macau, and also in some seminaries in China. At present, one of the subjects I teach is interreligious dialogue. As the Muslims would say, the original meaning of the Holy War is first and foremost the struggle within oneself against infidelity to God, rather than committing external acts of violence in face of adversities and challenges. For me, as a Christian, it will also mean taking up moral courage and continuing to live our faith and navigate changes with wisdom. I take this opportunity to invite you to pray together for the church in China, Catholics in China, those small in number, like a little flock in the early church, being aware of their historical responsibility may change the landscape of the Catholic Church in due time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that powerful presentation, Chiaretto. And we ask all those participating to keep sending your questions, because it's a roundtable at the end of the three presentations. We will want to have a dialogue across the board between the panelists. And now we invite Professor Jodi Mikalachki to please address the assembly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stan, and thank you to everyone at the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology for organizing this wonderful conference and giving us all an opportunity to hear one another and share. I'm really moved to be part of this panel, and thank you very much to Chiaretto and Flora. I also bring you greetings from the church in Burundi and from the University of Burundi, where I teach. I'm sorry, are you able to see my desktop?
No. No.
No.
All right, let me try. Can you see it now?
No.
Can you see it now?
No, we cannot.
Okay. I'm not sure what's happening, but I understand that Marlon has a copy, and perhaps he could put that up.
Okay, it's up.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm just wondering, can you see mine now? No? All right. All right, so choosing love in context of political violence, the Martyrs of Fraternity of Burundi. On April 30th, 1997, during Burundi's 1993-2005 civil war, Buta Minor Seminary was attacked at dawn by a large armed force. Ordered at gunpoint to separate by ethnicity, Hutus over here, Tutsis over there, students in the senior dormitory chose instead to join hands and affirm their common identity as children of God. Over the next 4 hours, they fell to gunfire and a grenade. During this chaotic assault, as attackers moved in and out of the dormitory, able-bodied students found the wounds of their injured classmates, carried them to safety, and listened to their final words. Dying students chanted psalms, prayed the rosary, and made peace with God and their classmates. Several were heard asking God to forgive their assailants. Ultimately, 40 students were killed and 26 others seriously wounded. Yet by the time of the students' funeral mass 2 days later, their solidarity had begun to turn the massacre into a triumph, a poignant victory of fraternal love over the ethnic manipulation of the Civil War. At the partial lifting of mourning ceremony, 12 days after the attack, I'm sorry, I'm only seeing the first slide. Yes, there's the seminary, sorry. At the partial lifting of mourning ceremony 12 days after the attack, the term martyr was first used publicly to describe the fallen students when local Bishop Bernard Bududira announced his intention to build a sanctuary to the martyrs of Fraternity of Buta. Slide 3. Personally financed by St. John Paul II, the sanctuary was completed a year later. It quickly became a pilgrimage site for Burundians and international visitors. Testimonies to the efficacy of the martyrs' intercession are plentiful, often involving reconciliation within families. In 2019, the Congregation for the Causes of Saints opened its investigation of the 40 servants of God of Buta, together with a Burundian priest and 3 missionaries who also bore ultimate witness to the love of Christ in the face of political violence. Their collective cause has been postulated as the Martyrs of Fraternity of Burundi, invoking the phrase that is popularly designated the Buta Seminarians since their death in 1997. What allowed the Buta Seminarians to make their costly testimony to fraternal love, particularly in the context of a civil war that mobilized young men and youth for violence, often targeting schools? How does the witness of their love for one another transform patterns of political violence in Burundi? Slide 4. Slide 4, thank you. And what does it offer to the global church in her desire for a new vision of fraternity and social friendship that will not remain at the level of words? If the victim of every war is human families' innate vocation to fraternity, then testimonies to fraternal love during war, especially civil war, are particularly valuable in restoring the human family. Sealed in one another's blood as they stood and died together, the martyrs of Fraternity of Burundi restore the human family through the offering of their love for one another. Though 40 were killed, others who loved and stood with them survived the massacre. In this presentation, I draw on interviews with student survivors, seminary staff members, diocesan personnel, Burundian intellectuals, pilgrims to the Martyrs' Sanctuary, and parents of the boys who died. Through their words, I explore what the testimony of the Martyrs of Fraternity means to Burundians and what it offers to the global church. Next slide, please. The boys themselves began to proclaim their message immediately after the attack. Seeing the seminary's rector approach the dormitory, surviving student Stany Niyizonkiza cried out, "Father, they wanted to separate us, but we refused." This is a remarkable statement from a boy who had just endured a 4-hour attack in which dozens of his schoolmates were killed or injured. Why was this the first thing Stany wanted to communicate to his rector? To answer this question, some context is necessary. During Burundi's civil war, state boarding schools were sites and targets of interethnic violence. Students killed one another and their teachers. Teachers collaborated with local populations in massacring students. Armed movements attacked schools and abducted students to serve in their ranks. By the time of the Buta massacre in 1997, most of the boarding schools that were still open had become monoethnic, either all Hutu or all Tutsi. This was not the case at Buta Minor Seminary, which had been visited by the Prime Minister the year before and honored with the gift of a female calf to recognize its testimony to unity in a period of national crisis. This testimony was the fruit of the seminary's efforts to foster a culture of peace during the Civil War. Observing that students began to separate along ethnic lines following the 1993 assassination of Melchior Ndadaye, Burundi's first civilian and first Hutu president, Father Zachary Bukuru, the seminary's rector, instituted evening meetings where students could express their anger, fear, and mistrust regarding events that soon escalated into civil war. Partly to release tensions from these stormy encounters, the seminary also brought students together in sporting and cultural activities. Next slide, please. Such as traditional dance, which Bukuru says, quote, brought us together in a single culture, uniting us in something beyond our differences in ethnicity, age, or social status. Survivor Innocent Ndayiragije, who was the incoming student president at the time of the attack, says the Buta seminarians received an education, quote, designed to produce rational men who could transcend the differences there were during crises. People who could say, if Papa did this, do I have to do it too? We shouldn't be selfish and always crying, my ethnic group has suffered. I don't need to be my father. Survivor Nicolas Niabende, now a priest and professor of philosophy, affirms that, quote, after at least 4 years of attempted ethnic division and failed ideological manipulation, the 40 young seminarians testified that we were educated for communion in life and in death. To do that, it was necessary for us to give primacy to the other. Next slide. Burundians primarily revere the Buta martyrs for their selfless testimony to fraternal love. They loved one another, says Teresa Banyankubusa, mother of martyr Alexis Ndukumana. These children died for fraternity, for the love of God. They left this testimony to love and fraternity. Paula Nibigira, mother of martyr Jean-Thierry Arakadza, understands their testimony in similar terms. They died together, even though people tried to divide them. They were willing to die together. Umuvukano. Next slide. Inscribed on the facade of the Martyrs' Sanctuary, the gender-neutral term umuvukano translates as fraternity. Godelier Nisedzerana, mother of martyr Desiree Nduimana, emphasizes the importance of the students' witness to fraternity in the midst of Burundi's civil war. The children of Buta refused to separate by ethnicity, she says, though there was an inter-ethnic war going on in the country. Survivor and physician Melchior Ngowenobusa, who was among the students in the senior dormitory, also situates the martyrs' testimony in this context of political violence. It's a message that demonstrated the importance of fraternity between members of a nation. In the precise case of Buta Minor Seminary, this fraternity demonstrated itself in a country where people were looking daggers at one another, where they were killing each other on the basis of ethnic affiliation. Next slide, please. Father Zachary Bukuru appealed to the students' testimony when he addressed the assembly at their funeral mass 2 days after the attack. Next slide, please. All of you here, especially parents and friends of the deceased, do not think of vengeance, or you will honor the memory of these young people who died hand in hand, forgiving their assassins. I beg of you, ask for the grace to forgive during this Eucharist. Do not try to kill in your turn. You see where violence leads. Indiscriminate reprisals along ethnic lines were common during Burundi's civil war. Those who carried them out often accused the local population of complicity in killings committed by members of their ethnic group. The armed force that attacked Buta was the military wing of a Hutu political party. Among those mourning the fallen seminarians in 1997 were Tutsi military officers and politicians, including the Army Chief of Staff and the President of the Republic. Members of an urban Tutsi gang had traveled from the capital of Bujumbura with the intention of massacring local Hutus. Knowing this, Gaspar Nzeyimana, a local official whose son Pacifique Kanedzere had died from his injuries the day before, stood up after the burial and implored the president of Burundi not to retaliate against the population. Mr. President, he said, if I, a Hutu, were complicit, would I not have taken my son out? Do not take vengeance on this region. But it was really the solidarity of the students, Nzeyimana says, that saved the people of the surrounding countryside. Next slide, please. My children did not want to separate themselves into Hutus and Tutsis, he emphasizes. If these people hadn't stayed together, if these children hadn't stayed together, I don't know what would have happened to Hutus in this region. Many of the people in that photograph would have been killed. Augustin Zohabonaya, a teacher at the seminary, recalls that many of those who attended the funeral were armed, with some announcing their intention of killing everyone in the area, even at the sacrifice of a few Tutsis who might be among them. That's why we have the right to say that our students are martyrs, he asserts. They saved a lot of people. Because of the students' solidarity, there were in fact no reprisals after the Buta massacre. Salvatore Chiaretto, now Bishop of Burundi Diocese, was rector of the nearby cathedral parish in 1997. He was one of the first people on the scene after the attack, helping convey wounded students to hospital and sheltering their traumatized classmates in his own room that night. He reflects on the spiritual nature of the martyrs' testimony to fraternity. Next slide, please. The martyrs of Buta were ordinary seminarians like any others, but then, in the name of their faith, they refused to divide ethnically into Hutus and Tutsis. Faith is stronger than ethnicity. That's what Jesus asks. He who prefers his mother or father to me is not worthy of me. And there it is, in the name of this faith, another fraternity that goes beyond the fraternity of blood or family. The Buta students testified to this fraternity to the very end of their ordeal. Even after the attack had ended and the regular army came to transport the wounded to hospital, it was the students themselves who carried their injured classmates down the dormitory stairs to the waiting trucks. Next slide, please. They were covered in the blood of their fellow students, recounts Henri Nizigama, a staff member who observed this operation. They would keep checking, is he still breathing? That's what proves their fraternity. Pierre Nyandwi, father of Martyr Desiree Nduimana and a retired soldier, asserts that the Buta students are martyrs because, quote, they showed a spirit of unity among themselves without regard to ethnicity, and especially because, by the grace of God, they held out until death. Next slide. Lidwin Bukuru, a Buta neighbor who survived the attack and has received spiritual healing through the intercession of the martyrs of fraternity, ties their radical faithfulness to the cross. When I visit the tombs of the martyrs, she relates, I always think about the meaning of the cross, that we're all called to venerate the cross. There is nowhere we can flee the Holy Cross. On earth or in hell, the cross will always be there, and we must worship it, whatever the cost. Where did the Buta seminarians find the strength to worship the cross, showing a spirit of unity even unto death? Next slide. Vincent Sarimana, father of Martyr Jean-Thierry Arakaza, insists that in the students' witness to fraternal love, quote, there was a strength that goes beyond men. I don't know how they found the strength to die together. It goes beyond the will of man. It goes beyond. It was not their strength alone. There was a supernatural force that acted in them. I don't think it's just for the context of Burundi. It's a very unique case. You should look in other countries to see if there is a case like it. I don't think you'll find it. Gaspar Nzeyimana, father of Martyr Pacifique Kanedzere, agrees. Do you think it's normal without the work of the Holy Spirit? You hear gunshots and you go and try to escape, but the children helped one another. Whether the Pope accords it or not, they're martyrs. Kanedzere is my ambassador to the Lord. He represents me. He also represents the family and the nation, the whole world. There are 40 sons who are ambassadors. Next slide. Reflecting on God's choice of Buta, a tiny community in a little-known nation in the heart of Africa, Nzeyimana invokes a Burundian hymn about Bethlehem as a small town that wasn't very noble, but which the Lord chose to honor rather than Jerusalem. He reports that his late wife, Jacqueline Carenzo, mother of Martyr Pacifique Kanedzere, used to tell him that maybe Buta was a small place where the Lord wanted the world, and especially the country, to see and think about what Imani Shaka, what God wants. This shift to Kirundi is telling. In the Buta martyrdom, it suggests Imana, God who reveals God's self to the Barundi, reveals God's will to the world, and gives the world something to think about. Next slide. Burundian theologians amplify the parent sense that Burundi is taking its place in Christian history through the martyrs of Buta. Vernon Bacinoni, retired bishop of Bururi, notes the growing inclusiveness of the church's liturgical calendar. Before it was centered on Europe, after the Americas, he notes. Now they've added Asia, Africa, the martyrs of Uganda. Anthropologist Leonidas Nitereka affirms that, quote, in the tradition of the church, we commemorate saints, martyrs, even those who are geographically or chronologically distant from us. It all enters into the tradition of the church. In commemorating the Buta martyrdom, he adds, we want to make present the value that is contained in this event, because the fact of accepting death in the name of faith, agreeing to die for fraternity, that speaks. It's a value that speaks, that will remain perpetual, that will speak to man at any moment in history and in any place on the globe. Next slide. Survivor Pastor Manira Mbona, whose brother Patrick Nininahazwe is one of the martyrs, is now a priest serving in Italy, where he is doing graduate work in philosophy. As a Burundian, he says, to have a place where we testify that there were martyrs shows that our evangelization has borne fruit, not just for us, but for the whole church. He speaks of the fraternal approach of Italians who invite him to share about Buta, as though this event went beyond Burundi. I'd been afraid they might not really understand, he says, but I saw a real openness in the way they listened, a willingness to receive our story. What is the meaning of this story for Burundians? Retired Bishop Venant Bacinoni asserts that, quote, these young people gave us a lesson in fraternity that goes beyond words to speak against all those who want to separate people. Philosopher Martyrs Niyizonkiza sees it as a lesson for all Burundians, revealing the shared nature of suffering during periods of national conflict. Quote, these children who died together speak to us. When they testified for fraternity, they were all called to testify together. If there is a problem in the country, it cannot strike one ethnicity alone. There are always victims on all sides. Next slide. For philosopher Jean Bosco Habarugira, the testimony of the children of Buta shows that the mission of reconciling the people of Burundi is possible. Teacher Augustin Zohabonayo affirms that in Buta, at least, that mission is accomplished. Quote, the situation that we live today in is one of great cohesion, following the example given by the students. Today, there's no going back on it. Next slide. The Buta martyrs' witness to fraternal love is indeed bearing fruit in Burundi. Bishop Salvatore Chiaretto observes that it is these seminarians who are helping us to live fraternity, pointing to the growing pilgrimage movement from diocesan parishes, which unites Hutus and Tutsis in long journeys on foot to the martyrs' sanctuary. He says, this is how blood poured out brings people together. While they were alive, they could praise the Lord, but because they died for a cause, they caused the Lord to be praised even more. Before, they were only 40 offering praise, but today they are thousands. They're purifying the site. Buta secretary Barnabé Bizindavi, who was on duty in the dormitory during the attack, believes that the martyrs' witness is calling Burundians back to social values they had abandoned. Quote, the testimony of these martyrs is first to the Barundi, who have been in interminable wars, in a fratricidal war. It's a testimony of reconciliation, of a return to the message bequeathed by their ancestors to live in peace, in fraternity, in love. Survivor Pastor Manira Mbona recalls that when they were young, the seminarians dreamed of being doctors, teachers, magistrates. Quote, all these dreams have been realized as a single dream, he now says, the dream of uniting our country. We have received this gift. Next slide. Grounded in the human and Christian values of Burundi, the Buta martyrs' witness to fraternal love in the face of political violence is also a gift to the global church and the world. It exemplifies the love made possible by God's grace that Francis cites in Fratelli Tutti as the source of, quote, a social friendship that excludes no one and a fraternity that is open to all. Even as the human fathers of the martyrs insist on the element of divine assistance in their son's witness to fraternity in the face of death, so Francis argues that without an openness to the Father of all, there will be no solid, stable reasons for an appeal to fraternity, quoting Caritas in Veritate to affirm that reason by itself is capable of grasping the equality between men and of giving stability to their civic coexistence, but it cannot establish fraternity. Bearing witness to the riches of their own country and an openness to the Father of all, the Burundi martyrs do indeed establish fraternity. As we respond to the poignant grandeur of their testimony, let us rededicate ourselves to the establishment of fraternal love in our own communities, the global church, and the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jodi, for that powerful presentation. It's very moving listening to this account, and I'm sure that it has stimulated a lot of conversation that we'll be engaging in shortly after the presentation of our next speaker. And I invite Flora Pasquereau to please address us. And Flora will be speaking on the innovative methods that she's applying in dealing with young people and women in Central African Republic who have been affected by the war in that country. Welcome, Flora Samba Pasquereau.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and congratulations for the two previous panelists. So in comparison to the other, I don't have pictures. So you have to read a little bit what we're talking about, but I hope it will be very, very interesting. So first of all, I don't know if you have, because I cannot see it. I don't see the diapo, so I don't know if I can start. Hello.
Yeah, so we can wait for, you're waiting for your slides.
Yes, or I can start without, is that okay? No worries.
If you can hold on as they will put up the slides shortly.
Okay, because they're not pictures, just like as a writing and reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Flora, you might continue the presentation while they're trying to figure out.
Okay, perfect. So yes, so today I will talk about my experiences in Africa and especially in Central African Republic, about traumatism, violence, and how the young people can find themselves in all this chaos. About like the monotheist religion and the Catholic belief. So we need to see the things about with another factors. So what are the factors causing trauma in Africa, especially in Central African Republic? For example, when you go for the worship, the young people either experience like suffering, and sometimes it's not an obligation to of the culture to go to the church or to go to the mosque or to go to the another kind of I can say a place to pray. And the society, when we find in South African Republic, is changing very quickly. The culture doesn't follow the change society. So this can be an aggravating factor for the trauma and violence. War, clash of culture, social network, parity, equality. the image of what's happening in the north of country versus what's happening in south country. So how we see the things, how I see the things is about how I can give some advice as a therapeutic approach, orientation to the young, and finally, which recommendation we can give through innovation. So today is not about the simple question of trauma and religion, but faith and how Catholics, how the religion can give a positive impact to countering the trauma, violence, and increasing courage and applied challenge of our young people. So in 3 points, today we'll be talking about the notion of understanding, when I can say is like multifactorial, and the question of counseling as a therapeutic approach, and the guidance as support for young people. And first of all, to begin, I will talk about the story. Maybe some of you know this story, about the story of John the priest and Jacques the taxi driver. John and Jacques, John was doing his priest at the church, and Jacques, of course, was a taxi driver. And one day, Jacques passed away the same day as John passed away. As they arrived, something different, as they arrived in paradise. And God met with them and say, John, to say thank you for what you did on earth, I will give you a stick, but a diamond stick with $100,000. Go, be free, and be happy. And this meantime, he saw Jacques. He said, Jacques, for what you did in earth, I will give you a platinum stick with $100,000. So be happy and do what you have to do. So John the priest came and said, no, God, you are not right. How that is possible? I'm not right. Yes, because when I see the plan, I was doing a good job on earth. I'm going to the church. I give the power of God, and everybody was happy. But this man is a taxi driver. So God said, okay. And in the meantime, the God review his paperwork and says to John, no, I'm right. You still have to wear the diamond stick, and I'll give to Jacques the platinum stick. No, God, you are not right. How was that? Because I did a good job on earth. Okay, let's think about that again. Then at the end, God say, I was right. You still have to keep your diamond stick, and Jacques have to keep his platinum stick. So John was so sad. And said, what's that? What's happened here? And God say, I tell you, this is a new management role. How? What is the new management role? So in French, you say the l'évaluation par les indicateurs de performance. So in English, I evaluate what you did by the indicator of performance. This is a new rule of management. God explained to me what does it mean. It's meaning when you was on earth and you go to the church to do the mass, people were sleeping. So nobody listened to you. But Jack, when he was driving, everybody were praying. So this is a new role of management. This is the end of my story. So now I go further to explain what we mean at the end. Now in Central African Republic, we are a post-conflict country. But I would say of the young people, saying that more than 75% of people are in South African Republic are young, less than 25 years old. They were born in the wars. They were born in the mutinies. When you think about the culture, we think a completely different culture when the parents, the guardian, people say you need to do so as you used to have maybe 40 years ago. But those young don't know what's happening like 40 years ago now, and what's happening is the north of country, the north country. About catechism class, Sunday school, Quranic lesson. When you talk with the young people, the teenager, they say, why do I have to go to the church? Why do I have to listen to the story about the God? We are Christian because 80% of people in Africa, in South African Republic, are Christian. But it's not interesting. People have like a punishment, physical punishment, and psychological punishment. When you go to catechism classes, is less, but the Sunday school, people still hurt our kids when they don't understand the God's parole or chronic lessons. Kids has been hurting. So this is one of the consequences of the trauma. And also, when I can say the social network and virtual life, Facebook, Instagram, people know so Instagram in car, but Facebook and TikTok. So what this is what's happening in Facebook, TikTok, and what's the virtual life, Nollywood, Bollywood, all those movies, and what they say and what they see in the country, they're thinking, something is wrong. That's what we say. Understanding the trauma is multifactorial. It's about the war, the mutinies, the culture, the religious classes, and also the social network and virtual life. Also, when you talk about Christianity and Catholicism, and I don't want to be very provocative, but is what I heard when I was talking with a young in car with Oboni people, we were being treated with Bethany kids. They say, we talk about gender equality. We talk about the laws and the dogma, and we talk about the faith. But we say that everything have to be 50-50. So male, female are equal. But how you understand things, if you go to the church, if you go to the mosque, if you go to like everything with the God's parole, is like people doesn't follow what they're supposed to say, or what they're supposed to, they don't follow what we think it was supposed to be right. Faith is personal. The society changing a lot, but what's happening with the church when they say 50-50 and we don't have too many, or we don't have at all any women who can do the mass on the Sunday? What's happening when you say equality and the men have the power? The young still hurting. And when you see on the movie and we go to the Pentecostals or the Protestants, you see over there, sometimes pastor, we have female pastor, male pastor, and the church is very dynamic. We need to dance because Bollywood or Nollywood saying that, yes, when you go to church, you need to enjoy the life. And when you see, doesn't follow. So this increases again the trauma and may like a big spiritual issues. That's why when we say which kind of advice counseling can we do when the motivation for young is going down? The motivation to be priest, the motivation to do the work of God, the motivation to not hate other people. When the belief as a traditional doesn't make sense as opposed to the society. When the kids, the teenagers, the young have a difficulty of adaptation because you don't forget, they were being born during the war. When for some people, they don't go to school, for the parents, they don't go to school for maybe 5 or 10 years. Some never experience the peace. When the society, to comparison to the church, or the church need to be involved in the society, but without being political. And I will think about what we heard yesterday. One of the students, his name is Raphael, was talking about what the Pope Jean Paul II was doing in Poland to build the democracy in this, I can say the name of the movement, Solidarity movement. So as a counselor, how can we do when all of those is appearing, especially in Central Africa Republic? So when we talk about counseling, we talk about the different kinds of therapeutic approach. Some people, some young people, once they did some, they have some criminal fights, or they steal, or they do something against the law, we put them at detention center. So when you put them at detention center without help, without counseling, without therapeutic healing, they will go outside and they will restart again, the thing as they used to do. So we, as a Christian, as Catholic, you go to the detention center to help those youth and to give them some hope. When you see street kids, because many of their parents died because of the drug, because of the HIV, or because they couldn't take care of those kids, how us, with our faith, we can help them, go on the street, talk to them, give them some soup, give them some hope. The same story as the orphans, when they're at the center, they'll be taken care of with, I can say, nurses, special educator. So we go there, and also you give them hope. We talk to them and you give some good advice to the adult who take care of those kids. And we try to work, and when I say avoiding thinking exploitation, because some adults sometimes, talk about things because the kids, those young, are very vulnerable. They're very like, they don't bear like the pressure, so they're very reactive. And as adults, we need to avoid like thinking exploitation. You need to work on the trauma also to avoid the PTSD, because most of the population in CAR suffer of PTSD. Working on the PTSD will avoiding the kids' enrollment in the rebel group, or we talk about army group. And still thinking that we need to increase their faith, our faith, by giving love about what you do and giving hope. So with those 2 points, advice, orientation with innovation. What is innovation? You need to continue to support the effort of religious association. There are many, many in Central African Republic, which deal with young people and the street children. We need to support the question of the faith, which is like more than primordial factor in reference to sample about the love. I'm a laik, so I don't have all the information about what you have as a priest. But we know that we work a lot with the question of love and the mercy of God. You need to create a framework for dialogue, listening, and guidance. Because what's happening, what we find, once young people go to the church or when they go to the Sunday Mass to Quranic lesson, at the end, everybody go home. There are no dialogues or listening or guidance. We need to work with that to motivate kids, to motivate young to go to the church, to increase the faith and to see, to increase, I cannot say increase the vocation, but saying this is my vocation. I want to be priest. I want to be the man of God. I want to be the woman of God. I want to live in Christ because I know that God living in me and I'm living in him. God doesn't need us. No, we need him, and how the presence of God can help us to be a better person while during all our life, we never see the peace, except maybe for the last 2 or 3 years. But this is depend which part of the country we live in. We need to learn to give a space for the discussion and help us about the choice and to remove the ambiguity of the religion, of the belief. Like we say, in Africa, we say, okay, the Bible says that, the society says that, the church says that, but we confuse as young, we're confused. So you as adult, as an elder, help us, and as a Christian, help us to remove these ambiguities, because we do not understand what priest cannot be married. As a pastor can be married, as imam can be married. Why those? We don't get it. Because we need to increase, I can say, the dialogue after the Mass. We need also to train the trainer during the catechism, during the pastoral courses. We need to help them to have an inclusive culture, not because I am gay or because I don't want to talk with another person, or because my mom is Muslim and my dad is Christian, so as I've been removed, is not inclusive. This, I don't want that. That's why we need to increase the training of trainer with inclusive culture. And for those trainers also, like I said, with innovation, we need also to have a official criminal record. For those, we work with the kids, we work with the young, because it's not because you have a diploma or degrees working with the kids or the young that you can do a good job. You can do it, but to give more confidence also to young and to avoid ambiguities, it can be good to have those criminal record vote at the assembly with the deputy, because it's not yet mandatory in Central African Republic. So with that, I am finishing my presentation. Is very short, but just to say what can cause the trauma with the young, what is the cause of the trauma, the cause of the violence, and how we can help those kids with love, with faith, put those trauma, put those violence aside, and build a better country. And Christians, Catholics with a faith do it a good job, but we need a better job because they're still confused about what is the faith and the difference between the faith and the law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Flora. And thank you, presenters. And this is a roundtable, and we want to plunge into the conversation in this way. First, I'm going to ask a question to the same question so that you guys can engage in some kind of conversation around that question. And then the second movement, I know that some of you have questions that you want to pose to each other. And then we then bring up the questions that have been posed by the audience specifically to address to particular panelists. So the first is that this session is on trauma, violence, and moral courage. And, you know, Chiaretto, you talk about the violence of the trauma of religious restriction in China, as well as COVID. And Jodi, you talk about this massacre or murder and courage that came out of it in Buta of these young people. Flora, you call attention to the long war in Central African Republic, but you're actually saying that the young people in CAR are confused because they do not find in the church that holistic pastoral presence, that they have more questions than answers, and these questions are not being resolved because they are being also traumatized by seeing some of the things that they don't like happening within the church. So the question is, where is faith that can generate this moral courage of a specific kind within our Christian tradition? So I know that different presentations here have tried to show how young people are navigating this situation through a courageous response, moral response. So I would like to ask three of you, beginning with Chiaretto, how faith has helped people, young people in your setting in a more specific way, how you can name that, what kind of faith has helped the young people to respond to the trauma that you mentioned?
Well, yeah, first of all, the Catholic population in China is very minor, in the sense that not even 1% of the population is Catholic. As I mentioned, China is changing fast, and not only within the Catholic Church, also the public in general. I think China has undergone tremendous change, and the youth especially, they are better educated, they are culturally confident, and as I mentioned, that how we Christians can play a more prophetic role in society today. The major challenge, I think, for us is the Catholic Church is to be well inserted in society, to give testimony, of our faith, especially with this moment of economic development. People are going after material pursuits, well-being, and we can see that even within the Catholic, within the church, I was mentioning that the young people were the first one, with this social mobility, going to big cities for universities and bringing exchanges. They are the first one to, without being with the baggage of the past, of division also within the Catholic Church due to historical circumstances, division, this mistrust of the government towards foreign intervention and all that. And the youth are the first one to go over these divisions. So for the I've also published a book for the Synod of Bishops on young people called Seasons for Relationships. And somehow I mentioned we were able to also give questionnaires in some dioceses and collaborate in Hong Kong. Really, how seeing how the youth can establish this relationship, first of all, of faith, with God, with this dimension, with spiritual dimension, not just the horizontal among their peers, but also to have this dimension. I think that would be a great contribution, little by little, to the whole country, as responsibility of, I think it's the responsibility of the church, of us to emphasize on these and overcoming mistrust and all that. I have great hope on the new generation, youth in China. They are going abroad, they are studying abroad. There are a lot of exchanges within China, this social mobility, and also, I think, in the future, internationally. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chiaretto. We pass it on to you, Jodi.
Thank you, Stan. I think this question of how does faith help youth in these settings of conflict, trauma, violence, and I was just thinking, listening to Flora, in countries where really young people have never known peace, they did not grow up in peace, and they have no reliable information about why their country has been at war for so long. And the first thing I would say is, I think enculturated Catholicism is really important. If what they meet in church or in their church school, or however it is that they're encountering the institutional church, is enculturated, it has meaning for them. And one of the things we'll see with the Martyrs of Buta is that they exemplified what are long-standing Burundian values, moral, social values of social cohesion and solidarity and dialogue and self-sacrifice and being faithful to the end, that Burundians have names for in Kirundi, Muvukano, Ikiganire, Iranga, and that they feel they had forgotten, right? They had cast aside during these, what one of the people I interviewed called these interminable wars that they've been involved in. So I would say the seminary's program, which involved teaching traditional dance to the students. It involved all-night prayer vigils that combine probably sort of liturgical elements you would find anywhere in the world, in Catholicism with Burundian ones. This meant not only that Catholicism, their Catholic faith, was deeply rooted in the boys, but then it also helped the boys remind the country of its own longstanding values and to return to those deeply rooted values that had been so violated. And we are talking about post-colonial contexts also, of course. There have been a long assault on those values and those cultures, and the institutions that they had for mediating conflict were systematically, in Burundi at least, dismantled by occupying European powers, from the Germans to the Belgians. So, and then everybody pulls out and you wonder why a nation can't manage its own conflict. Well, you've destroyed its ways of doing that. So I think the enculturation is very important. I also, I don't know if it would happen this way now. I think of the panel earlier, the roundtable, in which social media was so much discussed. I mean, they had a television set at this seminary, so they could watch the national news that the government put on, and they would watch it together, and it was very slanted to one side of the Civil War, and then they would discuss it together. Students were not supposed to have their own radios. Sometimes they did. There would be searches for those. In other words, they were really trying to develop a message within the community at the seminary, a boarding community, and they were really discouraging boys from fleeing and going home, as many of them wanted to do, and as happened in most of the other boarding schools in the country, to keep them together and keep working on this message of unity, of solidarity, and to keep developing among themselves a culture of peace. They were attacked 3.5 years into that. I also just want to mention briefly, I think this is probably done in most minor seminaries, the boys in the year before they would be graduating go on a retreat around Easter to discern whether they feel called to go on the next step into major seminary or go to university or do something else. And it's generally the first week-long silent retreat most of them experience, and that's youth on retreat. The year that they held that retreat at Buta, which was just 2 weeks before the attack, everybody involved, the adults involved, and it was the same people who had facilitated it in previous years, could not believe the level of focus, the commitment to prayer, silence. And the boys came out of that silence at the end in the sharing session saying things like, "Father, why has nobody ever spoken to us about paradise?" So there was clearly a spiritual preparation as well. And it was only that one class at the seminary that received it, one of the 3 classes in the senior dormitory. That received that intense preparation. They were all being prepared spiritually. And they came back and were sharing it. And were saying things like one boy who was very smart and always did well, but kind of a cut up, and you never saw him doing homework or anything. He started saying to people, "Hi, you think you know me, but you don't. I've changed. You will see who I am." And he's one of the boys who was killed. So he's one of the martyrs. I think there is a human preparation that the spiritual institutions are involved in. And then there is a divine element. And we are tilling the ground so that when those seeds of the divine fall into it, they have a place to grow from. They can be recognized for what they are. But I think what people experience around the Buta martyrdom is both being tremendously moved by the human example of what the boys did together and their love for one another. But we also have a profoundly spiritual experience that goes beyond those boys. And I think they experienced that also.
Thank you very much, Jodi. And we pass it on to you, Flora. You see that Chiaretto talks about hope. He sees hope. Even though the society is changing in China, he sees an expansion of the horizon of these young people. And Jodi sees a gradual recovery of deeply rooted values through the exemplary witness of these boys, the Martyrs of Buta, leading to some form of ritualization, celebration, and enculturated Catholicism that can help actually to refocus our spiritual gaze. Flora, in Central African Republic, do you have hope? And how does faith, the faith of young people generate this moral courage that can bring about a new society? Your presentation, you feel that there's a shrinking of this space, and people don't have a lot of models. So where do you think faith comes in the life of these young people that can bring this moral courage that can change things?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I would say, yes, we do have hope. Young people still do have hope because the young people in CAR are resilient. When it talks about hope, we need to understand also the story about the parents and those young people. They have a double statute about victim and also witnesses. When I was younger, maybe close to 6, 7 years old, Christian wasn't the majority in CAR. It was animist. And now we can say that Christianity and Catholicism increase are more like, we say, 70% of the belief in Central African Republic. Even though the young people didn't know what was the peace, their parents, the social media, and what they saw on the TV gives them hope. So it's like, and gives them faith. I can say hope more than the face. Why is that? Because they're not growing about the face, they're growing about what's happening in front of them, what's happening around them. And the face was growing because of hope. It was supposed to be like that. So they're growing and they say, yes, tomorrow I can do that, tomorrow I can be that. So this is a hope or this is a faith? And because parents, because, you know, like new churches coming, new like people talking about God is like a la mode. So everybody talking about God, everybody talking about religion songs, everybody talk about that. This is appearance, but not inside. I don't know if you understand what I was meaning. So yes, this is good. But when I find myself, like when I am alone, do I think about hope? Do I think about faith? How talking about God touched me inside? So at this point, I can say, if I understand very well your question, we as elder, as we say, more, less young, we need to talk to them and you need to give some proof what about God did to others. Yes, it's a conscience of war, but now the peace is there. Pope Jean Paul II coming, because when, not the Pope Jean Paul II, yes, Pope John Paul II came in 1985, but Pope Francis also came in CAR. And when they came in, people was believing and say, if we came because God sent him, we have the hope. And because after when he left CAR, the peace starting to be there, people now say, yes, the faith exists because we have the hope. because Pope Francis came and gave with hope. So we need to believe. And more we talk, when more we think about that, the faith is coming up. But priests, the religion, need to help us make it more stronger. It's how I see the things.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think you're calling us to make present the face of God, and people need they need the evidence, the kind of evidence that the early church saw in the person of Jesus Christ. You know, they say that God's power was in him. Yeah, and I think we already have some stories out there, but it's how do we get more of these stories in CAR, like the visit of Pope Francis in 2015, how it changed so many things. And we'd like to address some of the questions that have been posed here as we move to the second part of this roundtable. And Jodi, you have a question for some of your fellow panelists. You can pose the question, and then
I do, Stan, but I see that there are questions from other people for us, and I feel, you know, we've had a chance to talk.
Okay.
Rather than taking up more time, I'd rather hear from others who have questions for us.
I will read. I begin with the one I see here. Somehow, First, I think first question, the director of the center, Professor Cavanaugh, is asking Chiaretto, can you say some more about Vatican's 2018 agreement with the Chinese government about the appointment of bishops? Why did that agreement not lead to fewer restrictions on the church instead of more restrictions? Chiaretto, this is a question for you.
Okay. Well, the agreement was signed in 2018, and then renewed after 2 years. And I think it's almost 4 years that this agreement has been signed. And soon, in October, there has been ongoing dialogue. There's a delegation from the Vatican and the delegation from the Chinese side to meet regularly, one time in Rome and a time in China, but because of pandemic, somehow was interrupted a bit. But first of all, the agreement was mainly on the nomination of bishops. So it's not regarding all matters of lives in China. And the detail was not reviewed, but anyway, it's more of a general framework. I think this really helped for the Holy See, for the Vatican. The concern is the unity of the church, and somehow achieved that all bishops in China are in full communion with the Holy See. And on the other side, the concern of the government, I think also in a certain sense also to normalize, their concern is the more of the general public, the relationship of the Catholic Church with the general public, and so somehow I think this has been positive. But another factor is that China, unlike in the West, as I mentioned, that there are different religions, multi-religious, ethnical, and culturally, historically speaking, Confucianism is like administering has a certain authority over religions. Unlike maybe in the West, there's Christianity is the major religion. No, in China it's more multicultural, multi-ethnical, and so I think the major concern of government is, as I mentioned, on stability and not to, at the moment, not to have foreign intervention. So I think with dialogue, with mutual respect, these new religious regulations are catered to all religions. I think somehow it's the way to confront extremism, religious from their standpoint of view, to confront religious extremism. So as the Holy Father once said, really it's not easy to dialogue with China. You need patience. And he said, he was joking, Chinese should deserve a gold medal in patience. They have, and also the church need patience. You can see also the pandemic, the way of handling the pandemic in China is very cautious, and this zero COVID policy very different from the rest of the world. And I mean, we can agree with it or not, but it's their way of handling it. And I'm also hopeful that first of all is to normalize this relationship, of the church with the states, with the government. Then things will improve. I'm hopeful of that.
Yeah, thank you. And I will pose the question from Professor Bode to you, Jodi, because I think you already answered Bill's question about the portrayal of Jesus, but if you have not, you can bring the two together. Can you say something about attempts by various social and political groups to exploit the Martyr story for a variety of ends, some of a dubious nature?
Yes, thank you. Yes, from the very beginning, there have been attempts to exploit the story of the martyrs of Buta, and that was part of what I think of as the slow martyrdom of the surviving students, that they would hold commemorative masses. They have had a long work together to try to understand what happened to them, and to try to stay together. And I think their testimony of staying together now for 25 years is itself a witness to fraternity. People would come to their masses. Sometimes they'd hold them at the cathedral in Bujumbura, the capital, and get up and take the floor after the mass to deliver political messages. Or they'd walk out the door of the cathedral and find people with political placards. Sometimes at commemorative masses at Buta, they would not be allowed to speak. And one of the survivors who was wounded and spent a year in the hospital after, said that it was like reliving the attack itself when we were silenced like that. And he doesn't obviously say that lightly. And what the survivors now say, they have an organization. They were initially a survivors association, and now they have a peace and justice organization for reconciliation called Association Lumière du Monde Buta, Light of the World Buta Association, which anyone can join. You don't need to be a survivor to be part of it. And what they now say is, when we were children, we were handicapped, vulnerable, young, and people could, and especially in a culture in which, age and family and adults are really valued, and they were still considered to be children. But they said, now we're men. And we can tell anybody, even a priest, that their message has no place here. And I think they really are taking control of their message, which is a message of reconciliation, which they continue to make very effectively, because they always go out in at least 2 or more. They go in mixed groups, and they are the only survivors association in Burundi that is mixed because of the nature of the war. So people have been trying to take control of that. and there are many things that are going on. Even the cause with the Congregation of Saints has a lot of political aspects to it. But I think this is the moment in which the survivors are really stepping forward as adults and taking control of their message. There's also a question from Bill Kavanaugh about the portrayal of Jesus as looking white or mostly white. So the artist who painted the sanctuary, Moise Liwali, was a Muslim. And but he did a lot of church painting in Burundi, and he's a very gifted artist. And when he was doing the painting, the rector, Zachary Bukuru, gave him photographs of the boys who had been killed from their school files. And then because he was a Muslim, he gave him some pictures of Jesus. And Liwali said, no, Jesus, I know him in my heart. And I feel that the large Jesus in the sanctuary inside is a very Middle Eastern looking Jesus. That the artist chose to portray, I think, a historical Jesus. I do not find in Burundi images of Jesus as an African. You will find the whole rest of the scene beautifully carved, painted, with traditional Burundian clothing and modern, even Mary, the mother of our Lord. But Jesus himself is always presented more or less as a Westerner. And I find that it makes Burundians very uncomfortable, it seems to me, when I ask them questions about that. The angels that are above the martyrs there, while Liwali was painting this, Father Zachary said, hey, why don't you put some angels with trumpets at the top? So he started doing that, and they're all white. And somebody who came through in this process and said, why are all the angels white? Father Zachary then responded by saying to Liwali, you've got to put some black angels too. So, but people still ask, why are the white angels closer to Jesus and the black angels more on the edges? Oh,
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm happy that it's not the universal practice, because the big basilica in Yamoussoukro, Hufebwanye, was very careful when you see the big altar then that was painted with the Last Supper. Hufebwanye put in blacks there. And the interesting thing is also in the 12 apostles, Hufebwanye, the former president of Côte d'Ivoire, also made the painter to put his picture there as one of the 12 apostles. So it's interesting. So I think we're coming to the last part of our, we have a few minutes, but that is a question raised by Jean-Paul that I think had already been answered, but I think I would like us to use that question to respond, because he's saying here we are talking about these killings, but there are, since 1963, nearly 193,000 children and teens who have been killed with guns on American soil, more than 4 times the number of US soldiers killed in action in many other parts of the world. So the question is, what do you say as panelists? Like, obviously here at the center, our focus is issues in the global South. But I think he's calling us to some kind of accounting for what is happening here. And indeed, I think that could form the part of our last conversation. What do we think of mass killings, genocide? We have this epidemic of gun violence. People, they go, mainly in schools, in the one that happened, I think, in Newton, in Connecticut, Sandoval, where this person goes into a kindergarten and kills so many little ones. So, and we see what is happening now, so many little ones being killed in the war in Ukraine. So within the context of what's happening in America, but also what's happening all over the world, that young people are being subjected to a lot of violence and killing. What do you say as part of concluding this roundtable on trauma of people who are being traumatized, young people still today? Here in Chicago, in the South Side, it happens every weekend. Last weekend, 8 people were killed, most of them young people. In the parish where I help out, we lost 2 in the South Side before Easter. So I think we go in the order of your presentation, unless if you want to pass. So otherwise, we start from Chiaretto, then Jodi, and we give you the last word, Flora.
Okay. So I'm talking now? Oh.
No, you talk last. So.
Okay.
We go in the order of presentation, unless anyone want to pass.
Okay.
So Chiaretto, you are muted. Unmute yourself.
Okay. I think the world nowadays dominated by an atmosphere of confrontation, and we are facing changes, and people have different attitudes. No, but I think there's a great responsibility, no, from part of the church. What Pope Francis is doing, no, promoting this culture of dialogue, culture of working together, of fraternity, brotherhood and friendship, starting with helping the poor, going to the periphery. I think this is the antidote for violence. While still dominate culture very often, young people, because young people are very open, they want to communicate, they use social media. But if we don't use well social media also for the church, to be responsible, not to be too much conditioned by interest groups, by politics, and really disseminate this culture of fraternity, which is very important. We have this responsibility towards the youth, and so we should all work together, for peace, for fraternity, for also with relationship with nature. So all start with relationship. If we put right the relationship with God, then also with nature, and then with among people, and then it also among countries and different cultures, then we will find a better world.
Thank you very much, Chiaretto. Jodi?
So Jean-Paul, I often reflect on the fact my students grew up during Civil War, but that Americans are growing up under conditions that are not very different in a lot of our cities, also on reservations, those involved in migration as well. It's like being in a war zone, trying to cross the border, and being separated from parents and all the things that come with war. So I agree, and I think maybe what you're pointing to is that we think when we go to things about trauma violence, that we're going to go to other parts of the world. But it's here. There is Northeastern Illinois University has a Center for Genocide and Human Rights Research on Africa and the Diaspora. So they're looking at those things together, but it is focused on Africans and people of African descent. I would like to see horizontal exchanges between all parts of the world in which people find a way to move through this kind of violence. So maybe the survivors of the Buta massacre and their organization can be engaging with people working in American inner cities or on reservations, or engaging with people in China, which is a different set of issues, but with the people in CAR. To begin to work out what are the new ways forward, because the old ways clearly are not working and the new ways have yet to emerge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Flora, I just have 1 minute because we're out of time. What will you say to Jean-Paul?
I will say I understand completely what he's saying about the trauma, because when I talk about CAR and when we talk about the Sheung with the traumatization, with the PTSD, it reflects also what's happening in United States because of lack of patience, too many problems, so people don't know how to relax. So it's a consequence of the PTSD, emotional disorder, behavioral disorder, spiritual disorder. So this is bring us to what we see in United States. So we need to review how you see things and how you can make this happening. And just to answer the little question has been asked about the kids and as about the faith, how the church can talk to them when they never seen the peace. And I will continue this later on just to say, talking and be the how can I say, le témoin, the witness of God by our own experience can increase the faith. And this is what I found out when I got very sick for 1 month. I couldn't walk for 3 weeks. And when I would do what's happening to me, he was thinking about what God was expecting from me and working of my faith. So this is, for me, an example to talk to the other people. And I guess I'm not only the one, but we have an experience and how we can transmit it to the people to believe more in God about the faith, not about the hope, but about the faith. So I say I am like the miraculous person right now about what's happening to me. So I'm glad to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Flora. We thank God for the miraculous healing that you received. And we thank you, our dear panelists, Jodi, Chiaretto, and Flora, for a very inspirational, challenging, nourishing session. We continue our conversation in the breakout session in about 10 minutes time. For now, we put our hands together for the panelists, wherever you are. Just we say thank you, and we continue the conversation in 10 minutes. Bye, everyone. Bye. And
Bye.
have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.